A hidden gem of a game was announced during the hype and rollercoaster ride of the past Summer Games Fest. You may have missed it if you weren't following the news as attentively as others. This announcement was a showcase of a 90s-inspired 3D platformer known as Cavern of Dreams. Being developed by ByNine Studios, known for a handful of smaller indie titles on itch.io, and being published by Super Rare Games, known for helping smaller indie games get physical releases on Nintendo Switch, and for helping publish Grapple Dog. This game looks to be a polygonal? This game looks to be a throwback to the polygonal era of the Nintendo 64 with games like Ocarina of Time and Banjo-Kazooie. This kind of art style and gameplay is incredibly nostalgic to the people that grew up during the 5th generation of gaming consoles. It's reminiscent of the advent of mascot platformers that ruled the day in the 90s, from Sonic the Hedgehog to Spyro the Dragon, and yes, even Bubsy. This does risk alienating the hardcore graphic fidelity group of gamers that are renowned for judging these types of games for looking a little less than perfect. But I feel like 3D platformers as a whole don't really appeal to the type of audience that cares about whether people have 16 individual freckles on the left cheek, and this is more down to people who enjoy the whimsical, colourful, and maybe want to feel like they're 10 years old again running through Crash Bandicoot for the first time. I recall during my recent playthrough of Clive and Wrench, another incredible indie 3D platformer by Dinobyte Games, that its utilization of the standards that were set and invented due to the limitations of 32-bit hardware to create a modern experience that strips away the more frustrating and poorly aged elements of those titles. It creates a pleasantly nostalgic title that fits in snugly with the classics as a complementary title from that iconic period of game. Moving back to Cavern of Dreams though, you take control of Finn, a young dragon who set out to rescue his sibling dragons and rescue their eggs in order to save his species. Does sound kind of familiar? Whilst clearly taking heavy inspiration from a certain franchise, its execution couldn't be more different. For starters, there's no combat. Every obstacle is resolved either through natural gameplay or puzzles, and unfortunately that does also mean that you can't breathe fire, headbutt other baddies, and save the day using your cool dragon powers. The title also boasts that one of its core mechanics is exploration, utilizing all of your platforming and puzzle-solving abilities to explore every nook and cranny of these incredibly bizarre and fantastical worlds. This is a reassuring promise though, because most 3D platformers post PS1 and Nintendo 64 era tend to struggle by making their big, open, empty worlds, which means that the collectibles are all along a certain set path that the developers want you to take, whilst leaving like the little corners and, you know, pretty areas just to be empty and just there for show. Or it's like a second thought, or they don't have time to put in the effort to put secrets in every single tiny crevice that was in the map. You know, it's kind of unfortunate we're still stuck in that mindset now. Even like recent platformers that have come out have suffered from the same consequence of having these big open areas with nothing to do in them. Speaking of worlds, there are 4 open-ended levels, bursting with quirky characters, tasks to complete for them, and collectibles and puzzles to solve scattered everywhere. The game even features a dynamic soundtrack that shifts between different instrumentations depending on the area of the level you're in. That is the whole thing, I just made it sound like it wasn't. The game even features a dynamic soundtrack that shifts between different instrumentations depending on the area of the level you're currently tackling. Now, whilst I am a bigger fan of the smaller bite-sized experiences and variety that games like Spyro mastered, I was still enamoured by the open-ended nature of Banjo-Kazooie. And as long as it doesn't fall into the traps of Banjo-Tooie, Donkey Kong 64 with mindless, meandering, unending backtracking, the concept can work, especially if it encourages organic exploration that doesn't frustrate the player by forcing them to retread the same paths continuously for the sake of padding out gameplay. In my opinion, 3D platformers are a careful balance of several core elements. Number one. Fun and engaging mechanics and gameplay that encourage experimentation of exploration of mechanics to solve puzzles, find secrets, and explore levels in a unique way. This is to encourage subsequent playthroughs to use your mastery of the mechanics to solve puzzles faster, allow player satisfaction to push them through the potentially repetitive cycle of similar tasks and set pieces. Number 2. A fun and quirky art style that encourages player engagement and motivation through visuals alone. A compelling reason to progress and finish the game with satisfying boss battles that utilize the strengths of the character to maintain player motivation, to want to see it for the end, simply just for the fun of it. Thankfully, based on what we've seen so far, Cavern of Dreams needs to consider all of these points and carefully integrates these into its marketing to ensure it doesn't fall by the wayside of other projects that may employ the same concept in a more digestible way. It's hard to really know for sure what the game will be in the end, but from what we can see now, it looks like a lot of love, care and attention has been put into ensuring the game lives up to what you'd expect of a Nintendo 64 release. By setting itself apart from other dragon platforming mascots, with its non-competitive approach to progression and focus on puzzle solving and exploration, suggests it will be a fun and nostalgic experience. Now we just need to wait and see for ourselves on the execution of the project, and I for one am excited to play through Finn's adventure when the game releases on October on Steam. On October? It's releasing in October for Steam. And yeah, I asked, there's no plan for a physical console release yet. Never say never. That doesn't make any fucking sense.